Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Real World Productivity Podcast. The title of today's interview is Tracking Yourself to Make the Most of Your Limited Time. I'm Adam Moody, and today I'm talking with Samer Abousalbi about his background in startups, app development, product management, and more. We're certainly going to be covering some areas that can help you, so please stay tuned. And with that, let's get going. So first of all, welcome, Samer. How's it going?
Oh, thank you so much. Glad to be here. Going well.
Good deal. Well, I appreciate you coming. Well, I say coming back. We were originally scheduled, and you had some issues come up, and I appreciate you. This is literally going the extra mile to be here today. So I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I did not expect. I guess no one really expects to get an emergency appendectomy, but we never really planned for that. But yeah, I was on a quick little trip. All of a sudden, felt some abdominal pain. Quick visit to the ER, and they're like, "Yeah, we have to keep you for surgery." So. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'm out. I'm here. I'm healthy, doing well again. So yeah, happy to be here with you today for sure.
Awesome. Thank you. And you heard that, everyone. You know, people are running out of the hospital to get on this podcast.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, let's just jump right into it. My first set of questions is just about your background and experience. So all the other online entrepreneurs in the audience can get a little understanding of who you are and where you're coming from. So would you mind just as much as you want or as little telling us about your background, education, and any experience in kind of productivity?
Yeah, sure. I'll go ahead and give kind of my little 2-minute overview of my life, like 30 years compressed in 2 minutes. So my career really started, funny enough. I graduated college, my undergrad, with a neurobiology degree with the intent of becoming a doctor. And so I was like taking the MCATs, I was doing all of that, applying to medical schools, and I got a job at a clinic. Whenever I started working in this clinic, I became insanely frustrated by their software. And I just thought this was like so ridiculous that, medicine was advancing as far as it was, but we were being hamstrung and held back by like basic little software tools in the office. And I'd always had an interest in software and technology and had always loved like tinkering with computers and everything like that. So I did a 180 in my life and found myself teaching myself software programming again and leaving the medical track and starting my own my first startup, really, a little company to write better electronic medical record software or EMR software. And ultimately that company shut down because it was just a little too much for a naive 22-year-old to take on. But that really just gave me, honestly, that's what set me on this journey. That gave me a taste for being a creator, working in software, and ultimately making things that are enjoyable and easy to use and that help empower people rather than get in their way. And so the next several years, I worked as a contract software developer, kind of building up my own little business and working on software on the side. That was like the very first version of TimeTag kind of made an appearance because as a contractor, I was needing something to keep track of my time. I wanted to learn more about the business side of things, so I decided I would go and attend SMU in Dallas, Southern Methodist University, to get my MBA. Spent 2 years there, graduated from that, and then got into product management. That was like my first foray. After that, I got a job as a chief product officer at a startup working on mobile point of sale software. Worked there for a little bit and then decided to go full time after that with my own company and turn TimeTag from a little hobby project into like a proper service and company. So the last several years I've been working on that as well as some other personal projects, building out TimeTag as a productivity tool and a time management tool for people just like me, so entrepreneurs, contractors, and freelancers. But in addition to that, we've also been working with businesses and companies that have been using the tool to keep track of like employee time tracks or employee timesheets and all this other cool stuff. So it's been it's been a really fun adventure. I also in the last 6 months just moved to the New York area, and I'll be starting a new role actually in a couple of weeks at another startup as their senior product manager. So that'll be fun to transition into that. And I'll just keep TimeTag on the side, again, just kind of as a, it's in a really good place right now, so I'll just be able to maintain it. But I'm looking for, something new and to join a new team. So yeah, that's
awesome.
All about me.
Yeah, that's a lot. That was very good, by the way, for just a couple of minutes. You covered some ground there. So I'm curious, having not done it, and I think I understand the term, but if you don't mind kind of explaining for me and then others who might be hearing this, but what is like a product manager? What does that mean in the kind of the software sense?
Yeah, sure. So PMs, product managers are really just like, essentially in the software world, you typically kind of own either a whole product or a piece of a product. So product in my case, like I use TimeTag, my time tracking tool. I was the product owner of this. So it's really thinking about, you kind of sit at the intersection of business, design, and engineering. And so you work between all these, various different teams that each have their own interest in getting the product. So the business is looking in growing revenue and getting customers and reaching new markets. The designers are interested in working, creating a product people enjoy and that looks good and feels good to use. And then of course, engineering is tasked with implementing a lot of these things and making sure it's secure and it works well, and coding it and shipping it on Android or iPhone, et cetera. And so product managers really sit in the middle of these three disciplines and coordinate everything, basically. So you're like, it's a very dynamic role, and that's why I was drawn to it, because every day has its own challenges, and you always, you can never please all three. You can kind of imagine it as like a triangle, right? Like you can't sit in the middle of all three and have everyone be pleased. So sometimes, engineering and design is going to win and the business is going to lose. Sometimes the business is, the one in the pilot seat, and the design engineering need to take a back seat. So it's just all about like striking a balance and shipping a product that people like.
Definitely. So stepping into that role, if I had this correct, it was after getting your MBA, and then you stepped into the product manager role. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that was something that you were prepared for ahead of time, or is that something that, going through and doing some of the learning in the MBA program kind of prepared you for that? Or was it a little bit of both, and then you also had to just kind of jump in and figure it out?
Yeah, I think, honestly, it was a mix of kind of having the tools to do this and realizing, like, formalizing a lot of what I had already been doing, right? So, falling into a role and realizing that, oh, wow, this actually is a role that exists in companies. Like, that was really fun for me. But then there was definitely the mix of, oh my goodness, I have no idea what I'm doing. I need to go. There was definitely like a couple of weeks after I had been given that role where I was like, great. And I was Googling, how to be a product manager and what does it even mean to be a product manager? Just to get a better sense of like, okay, this is kind of their day to day, and this is really what the role entails. So yeah, it was a mix of both. I felt prepared in some senses that I had done a lot of these things already, but unprepared in kind of the more formal, like, okay, like here's really what, what's expected of you as a PM in a company. So it was fun. Going into that role was like a really good thing for me, because I had no idea that something like that existed, and it was exactly what I was looking for in terms of that dynamism and the constant, the adaptability required of it and the constant change.
Definitely. Well, yeah. Then on like the organization side, it sounds like you enjoyed it. For a product manager, what do you feel, that someone looking at this should really know? Like, what's some, like, either some hard skills or soft skills that somebody coming into this is going to make them really succeed?
In my experience, the number one thing that has just come up time and time again is your ability to communicate. So because the role sits between three completely different groups of people that each have their own motivations, their own interests, their own skills, their own education, oftentimes, if you put like a business person and an engineering person, they're going to speak different languages to each other, right? So the joke always is that the business people walk into the room of engineers and they're like, oh, we want this new feature. We just came up with it. It should take you guys only about a couple weeks to get it done. Sounds great. Like, it'll, no problem, right? And the engineers just like want to pull their hair out, because it's like, no, it's not going to just take 2 weeks. You're insane. This is a huge project, et cetera, et cetera. So the PM, like a really good PM can, again, sit as a conduit between these groups and do a really good job with communication to listen, and then more importantly, communicate that to the other group that needs to hear something in a certain way. So it's a lot of give and take. It's a lot of like moving, puzzle pieces around to make everything fit. But if you're a really strong communicator and a really strong listener to your customers, to your teams, to the product analytics itself, you're gonna excel in the role.
Yeah, that really makes sense to me. I mean, maybe obvious to people listening, but I just, it makes a lot of sense when you've got to talk across those. I've never been in that specific role, but having crossed some engineering and customer facing roles, yeah, that can get ugly sometimes.
For sure.
Well, how about tools side of things? Did you, come out, I guess you're getting ready to step back into a product manager role. Are there any like go-to tools that you use? You're like, yeah, I wouldn't do this without Trello or, Google Calendar or your pencil and paper or something.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned Trello, and that is definitely one of my like go-tos for just about everything. I think after I discovered Trello and started using it for product management, I turned my whole life into a bit of a product that I manage.
Awesome.
So, yeah. So I use it for just about everything. But no, Trello, I mean, really any kind of system that's going to work best for you is the best tool, right? So there's all these like different, you can get as advanced as you want, as you can get as basic as you want. So I know like, I've seen a lot of people who just use sticky notes on a wall, right? Ultimately, it's just how your brain works and what's going to make the most sense. But organizational tool, because there's just so much otherwise to keep in your head that things are going to get lost in the cracks and they're going to come back and haunt you. So I love using Trello. I use like a very basic system of like, here are, just a list of ideas. Here are the things that we're actually going to do coming up. Here's what we're working on now, and here's what's been done recently. Super simple, doesn't really need to be anything more than that. And that just helps move things along quite a bit and give you a great little snapshot at any moment of like, what we're doing now and what's coming up next. I am not a big calendar person at all. The most I'll do is like, if anything, if I just need to be somewhere, I'm going to put it on the calendar. Otherwise, it's just not there. I know a lot of people who schedule every minute of their day, but I find that for me personally, like I enjoy that time is not a constraint. I think sometimes like things are just going to pop up and you're going to need to do them then. And having, like I tried that for a while where I was like, okay, I'm going to do this for 15 minutes and this for 15. And what ended up happening is I just felt behind all day long, and that just generated more stress than usefulness. So I stay away from the calendar pretty much. Other than that, just like basic little email tools. I don't do inbox 0. The best estimation is like inbox 20. So
not bad.
Yeah, for the same thing, it's like trying to get your inbox to 0 generated more stress than help. So what I use, but 20 emails is perfectly reasonable, right? So like I'll keep it down below 20. Some things I do want to keep in mind and then come back to it and so on and so forth. So a lot of that is what helps keep me going. And then of course, I do use TimeTag to keep track of my time. I use it in a more general sense, I found, again, just keeping things loose and abstract for myself. And so what I'll do is actually keep track of literally productive time and break time. So whenever I want to, kind of like a Pomodoro technique. So whenever I'm going to sit down and work, I start that timer, the productive time one. And whenever I'm going to take a break, I'll stop it and switch it for, kind of a break time. Just to get a glance then at the end of the day to like, okay, today I got 4 hours of just like solid, productive time versus some days where I might only get 1 or 2. And just to give me an idea of how my day is being spent.
Gotcha. No, I think, oh man, that's great. That could be its own subtopic. Okay, I'm going to go somewhere else though, because you mentioned something that I thought was really good. I love talking about tools. I think everyone likes to. I mean, you've got the app. Everybody loves their favorite tools to use. And I'm always interested in what people use, what we can do better. But also you touched on something that I also highly believe in, and that the framework is more important than the tool. Just in the sense that if you need a system, that then you can put tools and kind of fit them into what works for you. So do you have like kind of a go-to framework, or is there like a general day in the life of that basically you use to help get this stuff done?
Yeah. So what I have found a lot of success with, and I have to admit, this took me years to come to, especially just, as someone who's primarily worked on either small teams or by myself as a contractor for all those years. There is no like guy or girl, manager walking in being like, hey, have you finished XYZ? You are the manager yourself, right? So it's really easy to be unaccountable and to just keep putting things off. So again, yeah, just to preface that I tried so many things, but for me, what ended up working was a system where Sunday night I write down in a notebook. Actually, there's Baron Fig notebooks I'm obsessed with. A list of maybe 10, 15 things that I want to do that week. So just a simple little checkbox list. And I write at the very top, week of July 4th or week of July 3rd. And I'll do all the little checkbox. As I go through the week, whenever I have time, as I go through the week, I'll start my day and go, okay, what do I want to get done today? If I finish something, I'll go back to the list and say, okay, what can I do now? Knowing that I have like an hour of time, or maybe I have 4 hours of time, so on and so forth. And I'll do the list and check it. So then what ends up happening is that at the end of that week, whenever I'm making my list for the next week, I can carry over the items that I didn't do. So now I have, a sense of like, okay, this needs to be carried on. What I can keep track of, because I'm keeping it all in the same notebook, is that if I have an item on the list that has been bounced over and over and over and over between the various weeks, after a certain point, I really just evaluate, does this actually need to be done? Or is this just something that I'm like being idealistic about? And so I just become very honest with myself and say, you know what, like, it's just not that important, like, clearly, because I've been holding on to this for 3 or 4 weeks. There's really no problem that I didn't do it. So I'm just going to let it go, and I drop it off to the list, and I never come back to it.
And doesn't that feel good?
It was really good. Yeah. But that was like such an important thing, because otherwise I realized that I would just, you start with this list, and 5 weeks into the year, it's unmanageable. You have like a to-do list of like 150 items, and now you just don't want to touch any of them. And so it was just getting that intellectual honesty with yourself of just being like, this is not going to get done, and it's okay. Like, just let it go. And so I'm finding that each week I'm doing the work that needs to be done is important enough for me to actually sit down and do it. And I'm going week to week and getting, making progress.
Sounds good. Yeah, there's definitely some common themes there. And I think for a lot of people, that's a really good one, that you've got to delete stuff from time to time. And, it's funny. I know the feeling. I've gotten so much better over the years. It's for me, it's a lifelong thing. But it's so funny. You still get that task that you're just like, I feel like I should be doing it, but it's been here for a month, but I haven't touched it. So
exactly.
Man. Cool. Well, I did a little bit of I checked out your blog post beforehand, and this is a little bit of a hard tangent, but I wanted to touch on this because I thought this was really funny, and I hear this from so many people. I saw you had a blog post about trying to use your phone less and how hard it can be. So it said you've been trying really hard to ignore your phone, but so I'm just curious, what do you feel is like the best part of using your phone less or not having it available to you?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of that rabbit hole that you get sucked down into, right? So it's just so easy to have that good intention to pick up your phone. Like, I want to know the weather. I'm about to go on a walk. So you open your phone after you go check the weather and see the temperature. Then all of a sudden, maybe notification dings in from the top, or you swipe to the home screen, and before you even know what you're doing, you're swiping all the way over to an open Instagram, and then now you're like in an Instagram rabbit hole. And then because something reminded you there, now you're opening up your email to go do this. And before you know it, 15, 20, maybe even an hour has gone by. And literally, you had intended to just check the weather and then get your keys and walk out the door. So for me, the biggest benefit has just been to retain the focus that I have, and, to like just be a little bit more active in the physical space around me. So I'm finding that like leaving my phone in a room away from me, for example, at home, I'm more likely to, in my downtime, I'm more likely to read, or, maybe even play a little bit of a video game on my Nintendo or something, or clean a little bit, or, maybe I'll make lunch instead of picking it up, because again, I find myself with all this extra time that before was just being spent looking at my phone. And now it's like, I actually have a lot of time in my day. How weird.
Yeah, definitely. All those little bits and pieces. Something that reminded me of was the Deep Work by Cal Newport. Great book. But I remember something stuck out in my mind was talking about it's almost like a skill to be bored nowadays, that we have something that we immediately go to. And I forget exactly how he put it in his book, but he's talking about like, just try standing in line somewhere and not using your phone. He's like, it's weird for people now. And he's like, it's actually a skill that you can cultivate. Like, think about something. Talk to somebody. And so anyways, I kind of connected those two and thought that was a really interesting thing you were doing there.
No, I love that. I literally do that as much as I can. Whenever I ride the subway, I try not to use my phone. The one thing that I've noticed that's really funny is that you get a sense that people think that you're weird, for just sitting there and just like looking and just, existing basically. And you feel a little uncomfortable that you're not on your phone, because then people are like kind of looking at you just like, why is this guy just sitting there? Like, what's wrong with him? Whereas everyone else you notice is on their phone and stuff. So it's been really funny to notice that like the world around you becomes suddenly much more interesting when you look up, right? And start to notice all these things.
Yeah, and then sometimes I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes I'm just like, yeah, wow, I'm just really bored. Like, okay, I'm gonna go read or something. But
sure.
yeah, it's good to be able to deal with it. I think it's kind of one of those now that not having something to actively do is becoming a skill to master, which is almost bizarre. But well, coming a little bit first full circle here. So talking about apps, I'm gonna say I'm a full-on Android user, so I haven't had a chance to use your app. So I'm curious if you want to tell people a little bit more about TimeTag, and then my follow-on question would be like, is there a timeline for us poor Android users to be able to use this?
Yeah. So TimeTag, like I said, started as really just out of a need, and kind of that same aha moment I had that's kicked off my whole career was that, you know, I was a contractor. I needed to keep track of my time, and whenever I went and searched in the market, I just felt so frustrated because everything was just more complicated than it needed to be, at least the way that I thought about it. So what I wanted literally was, I'm about to sit down and work. I just want to hit start and then go and work. I can come back later in an off time and describe all the work I've done and, you know, tag it and set an activity and so on and so forth. But in that moment when I'm prepared to work, I just want to hit a button and be on my way. So TimeTag opens up, and, you know, from the very first version all the way now to the 8th version, opens up to a big green start button. And that has just remained and will always remain like the kind of the key feature, which is that you can pop into the app, hit the start button, and then exit the app. And then you can do everything else like in kind of an off cycle time, right? So you can come back at any point and tag the time. You can edit your records, you can add in records, et cetera, et cetera. And so that, you know, that has been like this keystone feature that's remained there, and why stick with the app for as long as they do, because they just, you know, they struggle to find something else that's just as easy. And so, yeah, like, because at the end of the day, time tracking is really only as good as you doing it, right? So if it's too complicated to use, if it takes too long, any kind of a barrier there at all is going to get you to just stop doing it. And you're going to walk away, and now the data falls apart and it's not useful anymore to you.
Yeah, I know the first time I tried to do it was, you know, on paper, 15 half-hour blocks, and I think I made it 16 hours or something. I mean, it was, it's incredibly difficult. So I definitely see the value in this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a habit. It's like a muscle you need to like build up. And the harder that it is to do it, the less likely you are to stick with it. So, and as far as the Android version, I'm not sure I have a timeline. It may never come to exist, just because we're a small team, and our skills are just in iOS and macOS. So
yeah, and that was just a random question. I'm sure people listening some people may know this, but not being a developer myself, is generally that the reason is that most people you are, you know, versed in programming for one language, not just one, but in one area, and then to translate it would be, you know, kind of a large undertaking, or for someone who doesn't know that area.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, especially again for those smaller teams, it's going to be harder. And you know, I get some pushback sometimes where it's like, oh, you know, you could use one of these. Like, there's these solutions that allow you to kind of like write the code once and ship it everywhere. The downside to those usually is that because you're shipping across very disparate platforms, you get only the lowest common denominator. So it's hard to make an app in that sense that kind of stands out and feels like it belongs on the platform. And again, being someone who like really likes design and, you know, really wants to make things that are user friendly and make sense, that has just never felt like an option for me. Not that it isn't a valid one for many companies, it is, but just, you know, personal preference. So
no, that makes sense. You know, valuing the quality is certainly important. So I was just curious, and you know, I'm obviously happy to see it. If it shows up, I'll put it to use. But cool. Well, to wrap up today, I've got a question for you. You don't have to limit it to one, but if there is one, what one book or several do you find yourself recommending the most to people? Any sort of book.
That's a good question. I actually love to read, and that has been another benefit of putting my phone down, is that I have found that I've been picking up books, like actual physical books too.
Nice.
So let's see. The one book I think that I keep telling everyone to read, you know, the one that top of mind that I'll go with to start is The Happiness Advantage. So it was written by, I believe, Sean Aker is his name, or Sean Anker, and he has actually a TED Talk that kind of talks about his thesis about it. But his whole idea is that we have like lived in a society where we say, you know, first go get success and then you'll find happiness. And his whole thesis is find happiness first, then you'll get success. That basically we should flip the script. And so the book is really fascinating. You know, he's like a Harvard educated guy. He shows a lot of research in it about positive psychology and all of this. So it doesn't read at all like a self-help book. It reads like, you know, a research book backing a lot of this psychology. So I think, you know, reading that really was kind of a turning point for me because it opened up a lot of doors. I realized that I could gain more by, you know, kind of just finding happiness with what you have today and then building on top of that rather than putting the carrot on the stick out in front of you and feeling, oh, you know, if I just get that promotion, if I just get that job, once I get this car, once I get that house, and, you know, which leads to a path where you're always one step behind of your own happiness. So
great recommendation. I will have to check that out. I haven't heard of it. And if there's TED Talks too, I'll grab some links too in the show notes. So if you're listening to this, be sure to look down there. So yeah. Well, thank you, Sam, for a great interview. I know that the audience and myself has got a lot out of all this info and really appreciate you again taking the time, especially after what you had to go through. So where can people go to find out some more about what you're working on?
Yeah, so you can visit my website, capparsa.com, CAPPARSA.com. There you can find my blog. I call it The Productivity Monk. You can read all about TimeTag. And I'm also on Instagram at Samer Abousalbi.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again for joining us, and we will definitely be talking to you again.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
And thanks to you for listening to this podcast episode today. It can be really beneficial to hear about how others approach productivity, organization, and optimizing their business and life. And if you're interested in taking your productivity and efficiency up a few notches, head to www.productivity.academy/start. You'll find my Productivity Academy guidebook, which I recommend for all listeners who want to improve their lives and know that there are better ways to getting where they want to go. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.